Well, it's a very great pleasure this evening to introduce and welcome to our conversation Hillel Fuld. This is going to be a fantastic chat, I know. So Hillel, welcome. Great to chat. You've had a very hectic few days. What's been going on?
Indeed. I was supposed to fly to Australia today for two big events of Magen David Adom, which is the equivalent of Red Cross in Israel. So it's an emergency, responders organization. And a few days ago, someone posted a tweet basically calling to other people to report me and try to, block my visa because I'm an Islamophobe and all kinds of ridiculous things. And I didn't pay much attention to it. But on Friday morning, I received a formal email from the Australian government letting me know that my visa has indeed been revoked and I am banned from the country for 3 years.
That's extraordinary. So you weren't coming to foment political division in Australia. You weren't coming to raise money for a terrorist group. You were coming to help raise money for the equivalent of the Red Cross. Like, this is a charity. It's not an apartheid charity, is it? I mean, Magen David Adom treats everybody in Israel, doesn't it?
Not only does it treat everybody, but half of the volunteers are Arab and half the volunteers are Jewish. It's basically the best example of coexistence.
But that's extraordinary because we all know in Australia that Israel is an apartheid state. So how does that work, mate? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, Israel's an apartheid state. That's why we have Arab anti-Zionists in Israel's parliament. We have Supreme Court justices. We have athletes. We have entertainers. We have basically Arabs and Muslims in every single part of Israeli society where they live freely and they have more freedom and more rights than they would in any Muslim country. So obviously the apartheid lie is just another item on the long list of blood libels being told about Israel. There is no apartheid. There is no genocide. There is no occupation. It's all one big fabrication.
Well, what's really interesting is Israel has to be the worst apartheid government ever. I grew up in Southern Africa, high school university in South Africa, so they were quite good at apartheid. But I mean, Israel is as bad at apartheid as it is as genocide right now. It's quite remarkable that people believe these things.
Yeah, I think it's actually a textbook case of projection, because every single thing that the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian crowd is guilty of, they accuse Israel of, right? So if you have ever gone to an Arab town in Judea and Samaria, you'll know that there's a massive red sign in the entrance saying, if you're a Jew, you can't go past this point, which is literally the definition of apartheid. And if you see what they tried to do on October 7th, that is the definition of genocide. So everything they're guilty of, they blame us.
So let's get deep. Why? How do you make sense of that? I mean, you're a dual American Israeli, you're sophisticated, you're a tech entrepreneur, you understand the Western world, you're also a religious Jew. Like, how do you make sense of this? I mean, what are they projecting and why the hatred, and how have all the useful idiots like our dear friend Greta been drawn into this deep projection and really evil inversion of reality?
That's right. I mean, I can explain it to you practically, or I can explain it to you theologically. But practically speaking, Jew hatred, anti-Semitism has been just it's a phenomenon throughout the generations, and every time it takes on a new face, whether it's in Germany, we weren't white enough, and now we're white colonialists, and sometimes we're too poor, and sometimes we're too rich, and sometimes we're stateless, and today we have a state. And in Europe, it was get out of Europe, go to Palestine, and now it's get out of Palestine, go to Europe. It's absurd, and like I said, anti-Semitism takes on a new face. In our generation today, it's anti-Zionism, which, if you're an anti-Zionist, you're anti the Jewish people returning to their eternal homeland where they have a safe haven after the Holocaust. If you're against that, then you're against Jews and you're an anti-Semite.
100% agreed. Now, I'm very interested in your theological answer to that question. So what do you think's going on? Because my view is it's inexplicable just at a surface human material phenomenological level. What do you think's going on? How would you answer that theologically?
Well, first of all, in Jewish scripture, we actually have a scripture that says that first of all, I don't want to call it anti-Semitism. Let's be accurate. Jew hatred is built into the DNA of the universe. It's always been and it will always be. That's just a fact of life according to Jewish scripture. Now the question is, let's call it a historical perspective. What is the logical explanation for it? And the answer is that if you look throughout history, you see the script that there's an empire and it grows and achieves world domination, and then it throws morality out the window. And it comes after the people who brought morality to the world. I mean, who brought, who told the world that it's immoral to murder? Because in the ancient days, it wasn't immoral to murder. And the answer is the Bible. Yeah. So they can't come after the creator of morality because that's God. So they come after the messenger, and they come after, FedEx, you don't get your package. And that's what they do. They come after us in every generation.
So one day I can imagine a conversation with God going something like this. Hillel fronts up to God and says, "So God, you chose the Jewish people to bear this gift of Torah, to bring light to the nations. Why did you choose us? Why didn't you choose someone else? Because it's a gift that's come with a curse, hasn't it? I mean, it's the gift of really suffering for the world in one sense, as it brings morality and the light to the world."
That's right. I mean, at the end of the day, the concept of being a light unto the nations or being the chosen people, contrary to what some anti-Semites would believe, that it's as if we're saying we're supremacists and we're better than anyone else. Of course, that's not the case. Nothing makes us superior to anyone else. The reality, though, is that Judaism as a system, with the focus on the family unit and on education and many other things, is a system that sustained the nation and outlived every single empire in the history of the world. And we're a country and we're a nation that is, as you know, 0.25% of the population, and yet somehow we're winning all these Nobel Prizes. Somehow we lead the world in cancer research. Somehow when there's a natural disaster, we're the first on scene. So the Jewish people in the state of Israel have been nothing but a source of light in the world. And that's, again, not I'm better than anyone else. It's just a fact. And if you don't agree with that fact, you're lying to yourself.
Well, and the truth, which many people don't realize, but the Western civilization as we experience it, and kind of the Christian conception of government and separation of church and state and the role of the family and limited powers and all those things that came out of American and British conservatism really comes straight out of the Torah and the Tanakh. I mean, it's, we talk about Judeo-Christian values, but the Christian worldview is really a Jewish worldview. I mean, Jesus was Jewish, and that's the thing that people miss. So the Jewish people flourish, and to the extent that we build our lives on the basic structure of reality revealed in Torah, you're going to flourish, right? That's what's going to happen. Right. But you're also going to be hated, but you're going to flourish, but you're going to be hated.
That's the reality. And we see it. Listen, I'll be honest with you. Like, on the one hand, the amount of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred that I'm seeing right now is not surprising because, again, I expected it because it repeats itself in every generation. On the other hand, though, I didn't ever imagine in my wildest dreams that I would see this level of Jew hatred in my lifetime. And, I speak to my friends around the world and they say to me, it's not affecting me. I don't really understand, if I'm being totally honest, what they would consider affecting them, because when there's anti-Semites in Congress and Kanye West releases a song called Heil Hitler and Jews are literally alive, lit on fire, and Jews are not allowed to walk around in academic institutions, and Jews are harassed and even murdered on the streets of the United States, what exactly are they waiting for? What do they think is going to happen that it hasn't already happened? It's terrifying.
The human capacity for denial and minimization of traumatic and stressful and anxiety generating events is remarkable, that we can I mean, my family my mother was a German Jew from Frankfurt. They left Germany in 1938, and I have family correspondence where we see this minimization and denial all the way through the 1930s in my family. It's remarkable. But no, you live in Israel, so you can't deny the reality that you're facing. I mean, it seems to me Israel is fighting this fight, or is at the pointy end of this kind of battle for our civilization, because it seems to me it's not just hatred of the Jews that's going on, is it? Speak to me about how you see the war in Israel, the war in Gaza. What's animating that's what's behind it? Is it just a battle for land? Is there a deeper agenda going on? And how does that tap into the broader sort of clash of civilizations that maybe we're going through?
First of all, let's just get the about land out of the way, because the quote-unquote Palestinians had a state in 1947 when the UN gave the Jews a state and the Arabs a state. The Jews accepted, the Arabs not only rejected, but they attacked and lost, and that's been their story ever since. So they've been offered a state countless times, including, of course, 2005 when Israel left Gaza and handed it to them on a silver platter and told them, go make a state, and instead they turned it into a terror base. So this whole narrative of they want a state, there's never been a Palestinian leader in the history of the world that said we want to live alongside Israel. So let's get that out of the way. They don't want land. And the reason I know that, and the proof and the evidence to that effect, is go read their charter. Go read the charter of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, founded by Yasser Arafat, who was born in Cairo, by the way, who founded this organization to liberate. What were they liberating? There was no occupation then. What was he liberating? And if occupation is the problem here, why were they massacring Jews in 1929 when there wasn't even a state of Israel? So this land narrative is obviously completely ridiculous. And the reality is that it's a battle between two ideologies, obviously Western liberal ideology and radical Islamic ideology. And the problem is that in the West, we educated a whole generation to not use critical thinking. Right? And, if we tell someone that you're looking at one thing, but I'm telling you it's another thing, what you're teaching them is not to use their brain. And now, when it comes to pronouns, that's not a big deal. Call a person whatever they want to be called. Yeah. But the result is that when you have a war between good and evil, and you taught people not to use their brains and not to use critical thinking, all of a sudden, those two sides, the evil and the good, are equal. And there's an equal sign, and they're just two sides of the same coin. But we're not, right? Hamas is the modern day version of Nazi Germany. And I don't say that lightly. I'm the person who always says don't compare things to Nazi Germany. But let's not forget that the Nazis drank themselves to sleep out of shame, and Hamas live streamed it. And in Germany, countless Germans saved Jews. In Gaza, they were offered millions of dollars to give intel on one hostage, and not one Gazan, not one, stood up and saved a Jew. So I'm not in the game of saying, oh, they're worse or better than the Nazis, but the comparison is definitely appropriate because we're talking about pure evil. And the problem, that people can't differentiate between Israel and Hamas, again, is a fundamental problem with not only woke culture, but general, Western ideology that everything is moral relativism, right? Morally relative. It's, they're not better than me. We're just different. Let's call a pedophile a minor attracted individual. It's like, no, let's call him what he is, a sick freak who belongs behind bars. Don't tell me he's a minor attracted. But the problem is that when you teach people not to think, everything is relative, and it's a very big problem.
So one of the reasons, or the ostensible cause, presenting reason the Australian government, Department of Home Affairs, gave for revoking your visa to come here was essentially saying you're Islamophobic. You've made these devastating comments about Islam. You hate Muslims, and you're going to cause great division here in Australia with your views. What you've just said really alludes to that. Why is it that in the West we can't have a serious, thoughtful discussion about the nature of Islam and jihad and what it is Israel is battling? And to be honest, the jihad that's going on all around the world around us, but we live in some form of denial about it. Do you hate all Muslims? Are you Islamophobic? And what's actually going on with Islam in the Middle East and in Gaza?
Of course, I'm not Islamophobic, and the very kind of claim that I am is utterly ludicrous. And none of my tweets are Islamophobic, and none of my tweets are inflammatory, none of my tweets are hateful. They mentioned a couple of tweets in the document they sent me when they revoked my visa. One of them was that I denied that there was a massacre in Gaza last week, which we now know there wasn't. Another one was when I said that 10 to 15% of Muslims worldwide are radicalized. The reality is it's more like 15 to 20% according to all data, including data from the Pentagon. They called that Islamophobic. I addressed the whole claim that everyone in Gaza is innocent except for Hamas, when we saw thousands of quote-unquote regular Gazans marching into Israel on October 7th and thousands of others spitting and hitting the hostages that they were dragged into Gaza, let alone the parades that we saw as the hostages were being released. Thousands of Gazans trying to lynch those people. And if all that's not enough, the fact that Gaza as a collective elected Hamas, and all polls show that they have overwhelming support in Gaza. So are there innocent people in Gaza? Of course there are. But the vast majority of this society is deeply, deeply indoctrinated. And as sad as it is to say, even the youth, because they're taught from age 0 to hate Jews. And, so when I say that just because you're a kid or you're wearing a press outfit in Gaza, that doesn't mean you're necessarily innocent. I don't know what's Islamophobic about that. And furthermore, I don't even know what the concept of Islamophobia is, because phobia means an irrational fear of something. And when you have a religion that produces hundreds of millions of people who are radicalized and dedicated to the destruction of the West, how is a fear of that religion irrational? It is the epitome of rational. So, everything that they quoted in this document was in no way Islamophobic, and it's just an excuse to, close the borders to someone who has pro-Israel opinions and a strong voice.
Okay, so yes to all of that. What advice would you give to people like myself who live in Australia and the Jewish community and those of us who are supportive of Western civilization who want to have this discussion about Islam? What advice would you give to us? What would you say to us? How do we go about having these conversations?
I would say pay close attention to your country and your government and open your eyes, because I grew up asking myself why the German Jews didn't leave, how they didn't read the writing on the wall. And I didn't have an answer to that question my entire life. And now I do, because I speak to my friends, whether it's in America or South Africa, or England, Canada, and the list goes on and on and on. And they're just sticking their head in the sand. Oh, it doesn't affect me. Oh, it's like, open your eyes. Look at the data. I mean, so it's very sad. I know that it's not so easy to say to someone, just pick up and leave a life that you built. But if you had a gun to your head, you probably would. And so the question is, what constitutes a gun to your head? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems that everything has happened already. So I don't know what people are waiting for. It's very scary.
So you'd say to a Jewish person in Australia or the United States or Canada to make Aliyah, to move to Israel?
I mean, I wouldn't say that. That's the reality. I'm not saying there aren't challenges. Obviously, we had October 7th. Obviously, we're in a war. But here, there's a very big difference. There are many differences. First of all, we have an army here dedicated to my safety. Now, that army failed on October 7th, and there's no sugarcoating that. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a mission. That doesn't mean that there's no army. They failed. Missions fail, but there's still a mission. Who's protecting Jews outside of Israel? Nobody. Furthermore, in Israel, you know who your enemies are. Outside of Israel, your next door neighbor could be an anti-Semite you wouldn't even know. So, there's a fundamental difference. And again, I understand the concern of Israel's not safe. But the reality is, if you look, where Israel's headed, whereas, Jewry or diaspora Jews outside of Israel are headed, it's pretty clear that this is where Jews need to come and need to live. Because not only do they need us in Israel, but we need them. We're fighting an existential war. And, the more Jews that come home, the better.
It's interesting. One of the things that always strikes me when you look at genocides is mostly they're committed. There's incitement from the top, but then actually it's mostly neighbors killing their neighbors. When you look in Central Europe, a quarter or a third of the Jews were massacred by their neighbors in Central Europe around the chaos of the war. And of course, there was the industrial scale massacre, but lots of those Jews were handed over by their neighbors. There was collusion at a local level. So you can live next to your neighbors for years. The same in Rwanda, that worries me a very great deal, the relentless incitement of the Free Palestine movement. So tell me let me run this by you. I think the Free Palestine movement in the Western world is actually a domestic terror threat.
I agree.
And the consequences will be, and already have been, but will be, it's fomenting genocide. What do you think about that?
100%. I don't think, if you are able to look at the reality with objective eyes, you see that what are these pro-Palestinian people doing in the streets? They're holding terror flags. They're calling to globalize the Intifada, which is a violent uprising against Jews. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. They say it themselves. They support terror, period. Go look at a pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian march and look at a pro-Jewish, pro-Israel march. If you don't spot the difference, then you're blind.
Okay, so now what you've got some words for the Jewish community, move to Israel. That's great. What would you say to the Christian community? And I mean like religious Christians, not just the, tick the box on a census Christians, but folk who go to church and they're showing up and they're claiming to follow a Jewish rabbi, Jesus. What would you say to them in this context of conflict and terror and the war?
First of all, I'd say thank you to our many, many friends in the Christian community. There are millions of them, and we deeply appreciate that friendship. But I would say to the Christian world as a whole that, if you ever asked yourself if you would have spoken up in the Holocaust, now's the test. Speak up. You're, many, many people, a lot more than the Jews in the world, and we need that voice. Be a strong voice, stand with morality, be on the right side of history, and don't just sit back and let, what's happening continue to happen. It's unacceptable, and it's all of our duty, and I mean humanity, to speak up against this evil.
And just to be clear, the evil is jihadist radical Islam.
Yeah,
and that's important because I saw a tweet you made just maybe an hour ago. Haaretz, the left-wing Israeli newspaper, misquoted you and said you said that Islam was a plague, I think. and your real quote was radical Islam. So talk to me a bit about the distinction you draw between radical Islam and Islam, and how that plays out in your thinking.
Of course. I mean, again, it depends what data you look at, but let's be conservative and say that 10% of, the billions of Muslims worldwide are radicalized. That's 90% that are not. But as my friend Brigitte Gabriel has said many times, it's the silent majority, that runs the narrative, whether it's in Germany or Japan or Russia or every other genocide and atrocity throughout history. It wasn't the 90% that drove the narrative; it was the 10%. So the vast majority of Muslims are of course innocent, but it's those 10%, 15, 20% that are bringing radical Islam to the Western world. And the Western world, not only do we not recognize and acknowledge this problem, but anybody who does is labeled an Islamophobe. And it's a real problem because you can't solve a problem until you recognize it. And we refuse to recognize it. And it's right before our eyes. They are taking over in England. They're taking over Canada. They're taking over everywhere. And they're not shy about it. It's not like they hide it. They say loud and clear what their mission is. So we have to open our eyes, because if we don't, it will be too late pretty soon.
I watched last night I binge watched a bit of Netflix, and there's a show there, a 3-part series on the hunt for Osama bin Laden. It's just come out, so America, and it was really very moving. And I watched this, 9/11, America goes to war, America relentlessly pursues bin Laden, and I thought to myself, everyone's going to watch that, and it's moving, and we're like, yes, what America's doing is so good and right. And I thought, that's exactly what Israel is doing, isn't it? I mean, but the world wants to deny Israel the same legitimacy that it granted America to go after terrorists and evil people who are utterly committed to an exterminationist war against their being. So, it's fascinating. I thought that was I found it quite a moving thing.
Textbook hypocrisy, double standard. I'm sure you've heard this. I've heard a million times. No, we're not comparing, Hamas to Israel because Israel is a democratic country, and that's called a double standard. That is literally the definition of that is insane that people say that and are not ashamed to say that. So, the double standard when it comes to the Jews, again, is not something new, but it's staggering every single time. It just blows my mind.
So, in the middle of all of this, how are you coping? I mean, you don't strike me in your online persona and now chatting as an enormously thin-skinned person, but you get a lot of hate online. You've just been slapped down by the Australian government. I mean, how do you navigate all this conflict in this world in which you find yourself advocating for Israel? I imagine you'd much rather be out building a tech business and talking about Israel as the startup nation, but you're in this space. That must be hard.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy, and I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't affect me. There are days where I just have to turn it off, and I'm just like, I can't do it anymore. The hatred is just endless. But yeah, I have developed thick skin. Some of the things that people have sent me in this war are just absolutely vile and repulsive. You wouldn't even believe the things people have sent me, let alone death threats, let alone obviously what happened just now. The hate is basically endless, and it's coming from all directions, by the way. From the left, from the right, from the Islamists. It's all over. So, I have to develop thick skin, but I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't, upset me. It does deeply upset me.
And people here in Australia who may not know your story also know that your brother was obviously murdered. Well, not obviously. Your brother was murdered by terrorists. So it's not an abstract idea when you talk about this. I mean, my brother was murdered in Cape Town 5 years ago, just in gang violence. So I can't. I mean, I feel the pain, but for you to be advocating this and to have to justify your own position and continually in the face of such lies, and brother, it must be just grueling.
Yeah, definitely not easy, but I got to tell you, my late brother Ari was a very strong Israel advocate, and I often ask myself, throughout the war, what would Ari do? And I definitely am channeling his energy. But yeah, there are days where I'm just like, I'm done. Like, I just can't do this anymore. Yeah. But we got to do what we got to do. Everyone has a role, and that's my role for now.
Well, as it says in the book of Esther, Megillat Esther, for such a time as this, God put Esther in the king's harem and the king's favor, and so for such a time as this, he calls. I really believe he calls each of us, and he's calling people around the world to stand up now, because if we don't, in 20 years' time, it's going to be too late. And our kids and our grandkids are going to live in a world that looks vastly different to the one that, certainly I grew up in and probably you grew up in. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, 100%. People are not thinking ahead of themselves. I mean, I often write about this, what a conversation would be like between a Hamas supporter today and his great granddaughter, 30 years from now. Like, how do you justify standing with an organization that live streamed, rape and pedophilia? Do you understand what you're supporting? It's wild. So people are thinking right now it's all about the Jew hatred, but I don't think many of them are thinking ahead in what they're going to tell their children and grandchildren, having supported, a genocidal maniac organization like Hamas.
Well, I'm hoping they have a change of heart a whole lot sooner than that and realize that they've been, but the level of denial is remarkable. I mean, I've seen this with my Christian friends, that sort of winnable middle, people minimizing. It's like October 7 didn't happen.
Denial, total denial.
It's quite remarkable. So here's a question for you. What's one question you wish that I'd asked you so far that I haven't? About you or your work in Israel, and what would your answer be to the one question that you wish I'd asked?
Who's paying you?
Who's paying you, Hillel?
No one.
No one, dude. You're not on the what?
So I shut down a multi-million-dollar business on October 7th because I thought now is not the time for more, startups and marketing, etc. So I pivoted completely to Israel advocacy, and many organizations have reached out and said, we'll support you, but you can't say this word or you have to speak this way. And I said, no go. So, right now, literally, you're talking about God. God has literally given me a head nod every single day since the beginning of this war. He's taken care of me. People have been very generous, but it's definitely a challenge because at the end of the day, me and many of my colleagues are dedicating our lives to this, and there's no backing. So it's rough. I'm not going to lie, it's rough.
Okay, so if people want to support you, you've got buy me a coffee, GoFundMe, a Swiss bank account, send you gold bullion. What do we do? Bitcoin, bit of crypto. How could people support you practically?
I mean, there's a platform called nas.io, which is a platform for, let's call it, influencers to monetize, in a way that's not icky, right? Because I don't like monetizing my audience, but here you can give exclusive content. So I built a community there, and it's like $18 or something, and it's phenomenal. Right. The people in the community love it. That's one way. Or, at the end of the day, you can reach out. If you want to support, reach out, and we'll figure out a way for you to support.
We'll figure out a way. I didn't know that. I didn't know you'd done that. I finished up... I've been running Anglican churches for 30 years and finished up running the church in September last year to do this work full time as well and build this movement. And every day is a day of trusting God. You got to go. There's a God who's bigger than us, who's looking after us. Justice will prevail. Love will triumph over hatred in the end. And you just follow that God one step at a time, eh?
Yep, that's right.
Well, look, thank you for the conversation, and it's been really wonderful. And I'm going to wrap it up now and encourage everyone who's heard this to get online, support Hillel. And I guess for me, I want to encourage everyone to actually think about the way the world really is. Don't buy superficial, simple answers. Don't live in denial. A great Jewish rabbi who went by the name of Jesus, he said, "You'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Like truth, learning the truth, knowing it. That's a fundamental kind of Jewish value of the Torah and the Tanakh. So pursue the truth, and then you got to know it, and then you'll find freedom. So, and not live in the captivity of lies and evil and terror. So, thank you all for watching so far. Thank you to Hillel, and we're hoping we set up a program to get emails to the Minister of Home Affairs, Tony Burke, and just in 24 hours we've got over 1,000 emails into his inbox. So maybe, who knows, we'll get maybe we'll see you in person in Australia sometime soon, and that would be an absolute delight. If not, next year in Jerusalem.
Amen. Thank you so much.